Hi there, this is Chris Chaplin at Motor Legends. Today I want to talk about our latest collaboration with the Northampton-based boot maker Trickers. Going to talk about the boots, and if at the end of my little review, little presentation, you still have the will to live, we have a beautiful video that we shot at the factory that shows our boots actually being made. Over the last 5 years or so, we have collaborated with Trickers on what one might loosely term a motorcycling boot. We've had a bit of a break over the pandemic for obvious reasons, but now our latest creation, this new boot is here. It's called the Roadstar. Trickers is the most famous name in boot making and shoemaking. They've been making gentlemen's boots since 1829, which is some 7 years before Queen Victoria ascended to the throne. They operate today from the same factory that they've been in since 1904. And across their history, Trickers has made boots and shoes for kings, presidents, prime ministers, and a list of celebrities and film stars as long as your arm. Today, Prince Charles can often be found on the Highgrove estate talking to his plants, wearing his Trickers shoes. Now, our boots are clicked, as it's called, by hand. Even handmade boots are normally clicked or cut out with a machine, a stamp that comes down and cuts out the panels of leather. But because this is such a unique one-off boot, our boots are clicked by hand. In other words, they take a pattern, they lay it on the leather, and our leather panels are cut out by a craftsman with a sharp knife or scalpel. The leather is the highest grade MC Nasta leather. Once the uppers have been made and the quarters, in other words, this front bit of the shoe, once the quarters have been sewn to the uppers, the entire upper part of the shoe is taken to what is known as the lasting room, where the upper is stretched and shaped over a last. When the upper takes the shape of that last, it is introduced to the Goodyear welting machine. Now, the Goodyear welting machine sews a welt, and that's a strip of leather. It sews a welt all the way around the outside of the upper, but at the same time it sews in an insole. You then take a midsole, and into the midsole incorporates a layer of cork, and we'll come back and talk about the cork later, and a wooden shank for rigidity. And then that midsole is sewn through the welt, through that strip of leather that runs around the outside of the boot. The midsole is sewn to the upper and insole. Finally, a rubber outsole is sewn again, and you can see the sew marks. This is an indication of a Goodyear welted boot or shoe. The outer rubber sole, it can be a leather sole, but in this case it's a rubber sole, is then sewn again through the welt so that it joins to the midsole and the upper part of the shoe. Now, our boot, for various reasons, is one of the most complicated to come out of the factory. It's a unique boot, and we've asked for a number of things to be incorporated into it. So it incorporates more than 300 separate processes. So it is one of the most complicated boots that Trickers is currently making. It takes a number of days for a boot to go from an initial piece of leather to the final finished article, and as part of that process, skilled, time-honoured craftsmen and of course craftswomen will have spent more than 3 hours honing each and every pair. Our Roadster boot, as it's known, is based on a boot from the Trickers archive, but it's a design that we've taken and we've adapted it to make it a little bit more suitable for modern day motorcycling. In concept, of course, it's a short ankle boot. We've done it in two versions. We've done a black version and a brown version. The black version is meant to be a little bit more urbane. This is the kind of boot that you could wear with a suit or with a pair of chinos into the office. It's a very smart boot in anyone's book. We have no broguing on the gear change pad, and we have a smoother, although still very hard wearing, day-night sole. It's a sole, by the way, that because of the Goodyear welt, any cobbler will be able to add a new sole on. Day-night soles are readily available, and because of the welt, you just sew a new one into place. The brown boot, similar in concept, but we've got some broguing here on the gear change pad, which is a little bit more out of town, and we have a more aggressive, more chunky outer sole. This is known as a commando sole. The leather that we've chosen, as I mentioned before, is the highest grade available. It's that MC Nasta leather. It's a strong leather, but it's incredibly supple. Importantly, it's a leather that's been made waterproof as part of the tanning process. So this is a boot that's going to be pretty waterproof, even though technically it has no membrane. In terms of protection, we get a very hard counter in the toe and an equally hard one in the heel. We've got the gear change pad across the front of the foot, as I've mentioned. Here around the ankles we've got some added padding. Now that's partly for comfort, but it's also to give you a little bit of extra cushioning should there be some kind of coming together. The boot is configured in what we call the Derby style. In other words, it's got open flanks here. You've got 3 eyelets at the bottom of the quarters, and then above those you've got 2 speed hooks. And what that is going to mean is that this is going to be a boot that's going to be particularly easy and particularly quick to get in and out of. But like any handmade boot, you're going to have to expect that the Roadster is going to take a little bit of wearing in. The leather is soft, but it's going to take some time to break the bridge, which is to make this forefoot part of the boot become comfortable. But over time, your foot is going to sink into that cork layer that I mentioned in the mid layer, and that's going to create a mold of your foot. And after a while, the boot is going to become somewhat slipper-like. Although it has to be acknowledged that this is a boot that's never going to feel anything less than sturdy and robust. But there's one thing about which we must be absolutely clear when talking about these boots. On a technical level, we are not allowed to suggest that these boots are protective motorcycle wear. To meet that definition, these boots would need to be tested under EN 13634. And as we have made only 30 pairs of each colourway, that would never be commercially viable. So the question you might have as a motorcyclist is this a boot that you'd be happy to wear on the motorcycle? And our answer would be that this is probably the strongest, toughest and most robust short motorcycle boot you will ever wear. They're in a different league to most short motorcycle boots, most of which, or many of which, let's face it, are more suitable to the playing of basketball than to the riding of a motorcycle. The only boots that I think we would want to compare these with directly would be the Urban Racers from Roka. The boot costs £399, and that cost is going to mean that this boot is just not for everybody. But what you need to understand is that we have made just 60 pairs in total. That's a tiny quantity, and they're going to disappear quite rapidly. We do not work with trickers on these boots for financial gain. Yes, we make a margin, but when we take on board the amount of work that goes into creating these boots, it is not a commercial proposition. We work with trickers because we are simply thrilled that this supreme exponent of the shoemaker's art is prepared to work with us. It's that simple. Working with trickers is a privilege and an honour. The boot is available in sizes 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, 10, 10.5, 11 and 11.5. At £399, they are probably our most expensive boot. But what price do you put on 200 years of boot making experience?